At least the dog finally ended up with people who could afford him, my mother said into the rented microphone, and 36 people under a white party tent went quiet. She said it at my sister's gender reveal in Cedar Park, Texas, while I was still looking at the blue frosting inside a cake I had not tasted. I did not know yet that my parents had signed surrender papers, taken my dog Rufus to Hill Country Animal Services, and set off a chain of losses that cost me $68,417. Then a woman I had never met walked into a room 10 weeks later and read one sentence aloud, and my mother's lawyer closed his folder. My name is Melissa Ann Porter. I am 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Cedar Park in June of 2023. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My younger sister, Kayla Denise Porter, held the knife with both hands because she was 7 months pregnant and dramatic in a way people found charming. The reveal was in my parents' backyard off Nelson Ranch Loop with folding chairs, pale yellow tablecloths, and one of those balloon garlands that always looks slightly tired in real life. There was the smell of charcoal, wet grass, and vanilla frosting going warm in the June heat. My father, Daniel Porter, was already sweating through the collar of a pale blue polo by 6:15. I had not wanted to go. 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning, I had gotten home from a follow-up appointment after a laparoscopic gallbladder surgery. Nothing life-threatening, just enough to keep me from lifting more than 10 pounds for a couple of weeks. My apartment on East Whitestone Boulevard did not allow dogs over 40 pounds unless they were grandfathered in, and Rufus was 72 pounds of shepherd mix with one bent ear and a chest the color of old copper. I had him grandfathered in. I had his records. I had his training binder from Cedar Sky Working Dogs in Leander. I had paid for every part of his life. During recovery, my friend Sienna Morales offered me her downstairs guest room in Round Rock because her place had a walk-in shower and no stairs. My parents volunteered to help with Rufus for 10 days at most. Those were my mother's exact words. 10 days at most, Melissa. You're making this sound far more dramatic than it is. I packed his blue roughwear leash, the food bin, the packet of probiotics he needed if he got stressed, and the envelope from Cedar Sky, because Rufus had been part of a formal obedience and scent work track. He was also under a conditional buyout agreement with a private family security trainer named Travis Neal. It sounds strange if you do not know that world, but the arrangement was simple. If Rufus completed his advanced tracking benchmarks by August 2023, Travis would pay me $57,900 under a placement agreement already drafted and partially secured by a non-refundable deposit. I had put almost 2 years into that dog, early mornings. Group classes, vet checks, private drills, and church parking lots at dawn because they were empty. That money was supposed to become my down payment and erase the last of my nursing school debt. My mother knew all of that. She still called him your little hobby. What made it worse was that she could say it with such measured politeness that anyone hearing her for the first time would think she was the calm one. A dog is not a retirement plan, Melissa, that kind of sentence. Clean, reasonable, deadly. At the party, when she made that comment into the microphone, some people laughed because they did not understand it. They thought it was one of those little family jokes that mean nothing from the outside. My Aunt Cheryl stopped with her plastic fork halfway to her mouth. My cousin Evan looked at me, then down at his shoes. Kayla turned her face away fast enough that the pearl earring on her left side caught the light. I smiled because I did not understand it yet. Then I asked, "What do you mean? Ended up with people?" My mother did not hand me the microphone. She kept it in her own hand, standing near the drink tub full of melting ice and silver can seltzers. "Do not create a scene," she said. "You abandoned that animal on us while you played patient in someone else's guest room. We made an adult decision." The room went still in layers. First, the chairs stopped scraping. Then the fan clipped to the tent pole buzzed louder because no one was talking over it. I remember a baby crying on the far side of the yard, maybe 3 houses down. I remember my father's wedding ring tapping once against his beer can. I said, "Where is Rufus?" My father answered this time, "Safe," that word, not the kind that means protected, the kind that means gone. I did not cry. I did not scream. Instead, I put my paper plate on the gift table next to a stack of unwrapped diapers and walked to the driveway to call Hill Country Animal Services. It was 6:28. I know because the call log is still in a folder on my desktop called June 2023. A woman named Terry answered. I explained who I was. There was keyboard clicking, then silence that lasted long enough for me to hear a sprinkler start somewhere behind the fence line. Then she asked, "Can you confirm your dog is a shepherd mix, neutered male, microchip ending 7392?" My knees actually shook. "Yes," I said. She lowered her voice. "He is here, but there is a surrender note on file saying the owner relinquished him through family due to instability, medical noncompliance, and inability to provide housing. That is how they did it. Not by saying I needed temporary help, by building a story on paper." I asked if I could pick him up immediately. She said there was a 72-hour behavioral hold because the surrender form flagged owner volatility and unsafe reclaim risk. Those words were in the note. My own parents had used shelter language to turn me into someone dangerous. I went back under the tent because my purse was still on a chair. My mother saw my face and knew I knew. She set the microphone on the dessert table and switched voices instantly. Softer, controlled, meant for witnesses. "Melissa, do not do this here," I said. "You took my dog to a shelter." She said. We acted responsibly. My Aunt Cheryl stood up and asked, "Danny, is that true?" My father took a slow breath and used the tone he uses with repairmen and waitresses when he wants to sound patient. The dog was unmanageable. Melissa was not in a position to care for him. We cannot be expected to risk our home because she is sentimental. I looked at Kayla. She stared at the balloon arch. That was the first silence that mattered. Not because she had done it, because she knew and said nothing. If you have ever had that moment where you understand your life has just divided into before and after, you know how bright everything suddenly looks. The grass was too green. The white tent was too white. My mother's lipstick had bled into the lines above her mouth, and I noticed it with a level of clarity that almost felt rude. I picked up my purse, got in my Honda Civic, and drove straight to the shelter in Georgetown with my abdominal stitches pulling every time I hit a light on Williams Drive. Hill Country Animal Services sits in a low tan building behind a row of cedar trees and chain link. It smelled like disinfectant, wet concrete, and kibble. The lobby had one fake ficus tree and a donation jar full of dog biscuits tied with a ribbon. Terry was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair pinned back in a clip. She looked at me over the counter with that careful expression people wear when they are trying not to make something worse. She printed the intake summary but could not release him. "Your parents signed as surrendering agents on behalf of the owner," she said. "The file says they had standing authority due to your recovery condition. I never gave them that." She turned the paper around so I could see it. The line under agent relationship said immediate family caregiver. The signature under owner acknowledgement was not mine. It was close enough from a distance to insult me. My Melissa has a long first loop on the M and a cut back on the second S when I am writing fast. This signature had 3 neat schoolbook humps and an open tail. Someone practiced, not enough, I asked for copies. She said not without a records request because the behavior notes also involved internal staff comments. So I asked for the request form, filled it out at the metal side table beside a jar of black pens, and wrote my name slowly because my hand was shaking. Then I heard him. One bark, sharp, frustrated from the kennel wing behind the coded door. It is hard to explain what it feels like to know your dog is 20 feet away and still be told no. It feels like a joke so mean. Your body refuses to process it. I pressed both palms against that side table until the edges bit into my skin. Terry said, "The best thing you can do right now is give me proof of ownership, housing, and your medical capacity to care for him. We will review the surrender validity." My mother had already thought of that. By 8:10 that night, she had posted on Facebook that difficult but necessary choices are what family does when someone is too unstable to care for a working animal. She did not use my name. She did not have to. Half her church knew. By 9:04, my apartment manager, Louise Harker, had left me a voicemail asking if animal control had contacted her because there are concerns being raised. At 9:37, I got the first of 4 voicemails from my father telling me to stand down and stop harassing shelter staff. I did not answer any of them. I made a folder, then another folder inside it, screenshots, call logs, the surgery aftercare sheet showing I had a 10-day lift limit, not incapacity. Rufus's microchip registration under my sole name since April 2021, my vet bills from Anderson Mill Animal Clinic, the Cedar Sky contract, the draft placement agreement with Travis Neal, the Venmo transfer where my mother requested $85 for extra dog food 6 days before surrendering him. That last one mattered because people who think they are hiding something often get lazy right in the middle of it. The next morning, Wednesday, June 14th at 8:46, I called the microchip company. Their customer support line had hold music that sounded like a toy xylophone. The representative, Alyssa Becker, told me there had been an ownership status inquiry on Rufus's chip the previous Friday from Hill Country Animal Services, followed by an incoming call from a woman identifying herself as the daughter. When Alyssa could not verify her as the registered owner, she noted the account and ended the call. I asked if that note still existed. She said yes. I asked if I could get it. She said not without a formal release process or a subpoena, then corrected herself and said I could request an account history packet as the listed owner. Plain language matters. So I asked, can you send me everything with dates and names? She said yes. That afternoon, I drove to Cedar Sky Working Dogs because I needed copies of Rufus's training progress and any document that tied him to his projected placement value. The training field smelled like sun-baked dust and wet tennis balls. Travis met me by the fence in his mud-stained boots and listened without interrupting, which I appreciated more than I could say. He was not dramatic. He just pulled out the binder, flipped to the progression notes and said, if he misses the August testing window because of shelter hold or stress regression, the current placement agreement is void. I can write that. Please do, I said. He printed a statement on Cedar Sky letterhead. He included the deposit amount, $12,500, the projected placement amount, $57,900, and the retraining cost estimate if Rufus came back behaviorally set back, $9,217. Add the prepaid advanced course fees, the custom kennel setup I had already bought, and boarding recoveries, and the total financial loss hit $68,417. I remember that number because it looked ridiculous for something that started with a leash and a family favor. But that was the cost. Not emotional damage, real contracts, real invoices, real money. When I dropped that statement into my folder, I understood something clean and cold. They had not just taken my dog. They had taken the version of my future I had built quietly while they mocked it. That is how long it took them to erase me. 6 days. On Friday, June 16th, I went back to my parents' house because I needed Rufus's training collar and his orange medication folder. I took Sienna with me because she is 5'2", kind, and impossible to manipulate. My mother opened the door in a linen blouse like she had been expecting company she actually wanted. You have become obsessive, she said. I said, I'm here for Rufus's things. My father came into the foyer wiping his hands on a garage rag. There was a radio on somewhere playing old country, tinny and low. You're upsetting your sister, he said. That is enough now, Sienna said. Melissa has the chip registration and the shelter intake timeline. Neither of my parents looked at her. People like them almost never do. They ignore the witness and talk past the problem. My mother said, we have done nothing except protect that animal from chaos. I said, then give me the medication folder. There was a pause, not because she was considering it, because she had forgotten about the paperwork. She turned toward the hallway and called, Kayla, bring the orange folder from the hall closet. So Kayla did know. She came out carrying it with both hands, eyes fixed on the top flap, mascara smudged under one eye. She was wearing one of those oversized t-shirts from her prenatal yoga class and house slippers in the middle of the afternoon. She looked as if she had not slept. When she handed it to me, our fingers touched, and she whispered, so low I almost missed it. Mom told them he had bitten Dad. I looked up. My father said, do not start inventing things. I opened the folder right there in their foyer. Vaccination sheets, weight chart, a handwritten note from my mother about his probiotic schedule, and tucked behind the rabies certificate, one page from the shelter intake copy she must have forgotten to remove. On it, under surrender reason, a staff member had typed owner unavailable after aggression incident. Secondary note, verbal history from family. One male in home bitten while assisting after surgery. Rufus had never bitten my father. Not once. I still have every vet and training behavior log. Not one aggression incident. Not one. I slid the paper back in and said, "Thank you." My mother smiled in a way that would sound impossible if you have never met this kind of woman. Perfectly calm, "You are welcome." I left. In the car, Sienna said, "That is your break." She was right. If you have ever had someone lie about you in a way designed to sound responsible, then you know that rage comes second. First comes paperwork. That is the unfair part. You do not get to fall apart. You have to become organized. Before we get to the part where one small mistake cracked this open, please take a second to like and subscribe if you are still with me. Stories like this are why receipts matter. That evening, I sent the records request to the shelter by email and certified mail because I wanted 2 timestamps. Then I drove to Anderson Mill Animal Clinic and asked the front desk, a woman named Perla Vance, for all behavior notes, vaccination records, and the clinic's no aggression flags. Perla knew Rufus because he always leaned against the counter and shed on everything. She printed the chart and said, "Honey, this dog has a note here that says extremely social, high train drive, no bite history. If somebody told a shelter otherwise, they're lying." I asked if she would put that on letterhead. She did. Monday morning, June 19th, I got a call from Louise Harker, my apartment manager. Her voice had changed, less guarded. "Melissa, I need to let you know your mother contacted me twice and sent an email saying your dog had a dangerous history and that you were refusing mental health treatment. She asked if management could block the animal's return." The hallway outside my apartment smelled like bleach because the cleaning company had just mopped. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. I said, "Will you forward the email?" There was a small pause. Yes, off the record, this was inappropriate. She forwarded it at 10:11. My mother had written from her church committee Gmail because she was careful in the stupidest ways. Same headshot, same full signature line, same phone number. By then, I had enough to request a review meeting with the shelter director. Again, not a dramatic process. I just called, asked who handled contested surrenders, and said, "I need the person who can look at forged signatures and false ownership claims." They gave me a meeting for Wednesday, June 21st at 2:30. I went in with a 3-ring binder. Section 1 was ownership. Chip registration, vet invoices, city dog license, apartment exemption letter, food purchases, grooming receipts, and 37 photos with metadata showing Rufus living in my apartment over 2 years. Section 2 was care capacity, surgery restrictions, follow-up note clearing me for normal activity by June 19th, texts arranging temporary care only through June 17th. Section 3 was financial loss. Cedar Sky statement, placement agreement draft, receipts, invoices. Section 4 was false statements. My mother's email to Louise, the intake sheet mentioning the alleged bite, the Facebook post screenshots, my father's voicemails. The shelter director, Monique Rains, was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with dark curls clipped up and a legal pad covered in tiny, neat handwriting. Terry sat in too. So did a volunteer coordinator named Evelyn Cho because she had been present during intake. Monique looked through the file for almost 20 minutes without interrupting. Paper turning, air conditioner humming, a dog whining somewhere in the back. Then she put one fingertip on the signature page and said, "This is not the same handwriting as your driver's license signature on the owner registration card." I said no. Evelyn looked up then. "The woman who came in with the man kept correcting him," she said. "He called the dog Rusty twice," she whispered. Then he switched to Rufus. I remember because I wrote down that the family seemed unfamiliar with the dog. I turned to her so fast my chair legs scraped. "You wrote that down?" She nodded. In my intake observation notes, I did not realize it mattered at the time. Outsider truth always sounds almost casual when it arrives. That is what makes it so devastating. Monique asked if I would sign a declaration affirming I had never authorized surrender and that all records supplied were accurate. I did, she said. They would place an immediate hold on adoption and review the surrender validity. If we determine fraud or material misrepresentation, the animal is returned to verified owner and related parties may be billed for administrative costs, she said. I asked, "Can I see him?" She looked at Terry. Terry said yes. The kennel room was loud in a way that goes through your bones. Barking, metal latches, concrete echo, and underneath it, that particular smell of wet fur and disinfectant that sticks to the back of your throat. Rufus was in kennel B12. He stood up the second he saw me and made this strange high sound he only made once before. When I came back from a weekend trip to Houston, he had lost weight in 9 days. Not a dangerous amount. Enough that I could see it at his hips. Enough. I sat on the floor in front of the kennel door because standing hurt after surgery anyway, and he pressed his muzzle through the bars so hard the skin around his nose flattened. I said, "I know," I cried in the car after. "Not there." 3 days later, Friday, June 23rd at 4:12 in the afternoon, Monique called. I was in the HEB parking lot with a cart full of soup and paper towels. She said, "The surrender is invalid. We are releasing Rufus to you today. There will also be a restitution review for costs linked to fraudulent intake and boarding. I got there in 19 minutes. Georgetown to the shelter in 19 minutes with every red light feeling like an insult. When they brought him out, he had on a plain slip lid, not his gear, and his fur smelled like industrial shampoo. He planted both paws on my shoulders and nearly knocked me over. Terry laughed once through her nose and said, "He definitely knows who you are." My father called while I was buckling Rufus into the back seat with his crash harness. I answered because I wanted his voice recorded in context. He said, "You have embarrassed your mother all over town," I said. "You forged my signature." He said very evenly, "You should think carefully about saying words like that," I said. "I am. Everything is being compared." Silence, then he said, "You're choosing a dog over your family." I hung up. That night, my mother posted a Bible verse about peacekeeping. The comments were full of women from church writing things like praying for your heart, and family is complicated. No one says fraud in public while it is still in progress. They call it pain. They call it misunderstanding. They call it stress. Anything but the thing itself. By early July, the shelter had sent me a recovery breakdown showing what they considered direct measurable loss from the fraudulent surrender. Boarding extension caused by contested release, invalid aggression processing, retraining assessment, canceled test fees, and documentation costs. When paired with the Cedar Sky statement and the trainer's loss verification, the total stood at $68,417. Monique told me plainly, "We cannot force your parents to care about your relationship. We can document what their actions cost." So I did the next plain thing. I handed the binder to a lawyer. Not because I wanted a dramatic courtroom scene, because I wanted someone with a postage meter and a very calm voice to send my parents a demand packet they could not mock. Her name was Lauren Patel, and she had a tiny office in Round Rock above a tax preparer's storefront that always smelled faintly like toner and cinnamon gum. She was recommended by Sienna's cousin. Lauren wore navy flats and never wasted a sentence. She flipped through the file and said, "This is ugly, but it is tidy. That helps." I laughed for the first time in weeks. She sent letters to both my parents on July 10th. Not threatening, precise. She itemized the losses. She included copies of the false signature, the intake inconsistency, Evelyn Cho's note, Louise's forwarded email, Perla's clinic letter, and the chip account history request pending confirmation. She gave them 14 days to preserve records and discuss payment before further action. Again, plain language. She was basically saying, "Do not delete anything, and you need to take this seriously." My mother's response came on July 14th at 8:52 in the morning. One paragraph by email. "Any alleged losses tied to speculative dog handling income are self-invented. We acted as temporary caretakers under obvious necessity. Melissa has a long history of inflating grievances." That sentence got forwarded straight into my evidence folder. My father said nothing, which is how he hides. My mother pushes, my father erases. On Tuesday, July 18th, Kayla came to my apartment without calling first. I opened the door and found her standing there in sandals, holding a bakery box from Russell's, the pink kind with the twine handle. It smelled like lemon and butter from the cupcakes inside. She looked swollen, tired, and ashamed in a way that made me feel angry and protective at once. "I should have said something at the party," she said. I did not invite her in right away. She looked past me and spotted Rufus asleep on the rug with his paws twitching. "Mom made Dad do the signing," she said. "She filled out most of it first at home. He practiced your name on the back of an HEB receipt. I saw it in the kitchen trash. I opened the door wider. She sat at my table and kept rubbing the edge of the bakery box until the cardboard frayed under her thumb. She told the shelter he had bitten Dad. He did not. Dad got scratched when he tried to drag him by the collar. Mom said they needed stronger language or they would just make you pick him up. There it was, the missing piece I could never have gotten from a stranger. I asked, "Why didn't you tell me then?" She started crying, but quietly. Kayla does everything quietly when it matters. Because every time I push back, Mom turns it into a whole thing. And I was pregnant and tired, and I told myself it was temporary, and then you called from the driveway, and I still said nothing. That was the second silence that mattered. I asked her to write it down. Not because I wanted to punish her, because this was no longer about what she felt. It was about what she knew, she did. A page and a half in blue ink on lined paper from some prenatal class notebook, dated and signed. Then Lauren had her come to the office 2 days later to sign a typed statement too. Kayla was shaking so hard she had to rewrite her initials twice. Lauren did not comfort her. I liked that about Lauren. If you have ever waited months for one person to stop being afraid and tell the truth, you know how quiet that victory is? No music, no fireworks, just a sentence finally written in ink. I still did not know how hard my mother would keep pushing, though. That part came next. On August 1st, a Tuesday, my employer got a call. I worked 3 12-hour shifts a week as a patient care tech at St. David's North Austin, while finishing prerequisite paperwork for an RN bridge program. My supervisor, Marcia Gill, called me into her office after lunch. The room smelled like stale coffee and chlorhexidine wipes. She closed the door and said, "Someone claiming to be your mother said there was an active animal aggression issue and mental instability concern involving you. She said we should be aware because you work around vulnerable people. There is a kind of humiliation that arrives without heat. Your face does not flush, your stomach just goes cold," I said. "Did she leave a callback number?" Marcia turned her screen toward me. Same church Gmail signature, same number. Marcia had known me for 18 months. She looked angry on my behalf, which almost made me cry. I told her if she called this unit again, I would report it internally. I said, "Can you email me what happened with the time?" She did 1:11 p.m. Incoming call to nurse manager line. That email became Exhibit 24 in Lauren's folder. My mother was not trying to save face anymore. She was trying to make me expensive to be. By the middle of August, Lauren had enough to set a mediation date because my parents finally retained counsel after receiving a second packet with the microchip account history attached. The history included Alyssa Becker's note from June 9th, 3 days before surrender. Female caller attempted ownership change claim. Unable to verify security questions, advised to contact registered owner. Account flagged. That one line did something physical to me when I first read it. My mother had tried to take Rufus on paper before she gave him away in person. She had started with the chip. The mediation was set for Thursday, September 7th at 10 in the morning in an office park on Mesa Drive in Austin. Beige conference room, fake landscape print, carafe of coffee no one touched. Lauren on my left, my parents across from me with their lawyer, Walter Hines, a man with a gold watch and a pleasant face that made him dangerous. My mother wore cream. Of course she did. My father wore a gray sport coat he reserves for funerals and anything else requiring innocence. Walter started with the soft voice of men billing by the hour. Families make regrettable decisions under stress. Let us see whether there is a practical resolution here. I did not speak. Lauren did. She walked through the timeline. Temporary care request. Failed chip access. Forged owner signature. False bite claim. Contact with housing. Contact with employer. Financial losses attached to the invalid surrender. She laid the documents out in the order they happened, which is one of the cleanest forms of revenge I know. My mother listened with her hands folded. When Lauren finished, she said, "Melissa is young. She has always mistaken intensity for accuracy. The dog was becoming a danger, and any projected income attached to him was fantasy." Lauren slid the Cedar Sky statement across the table. "The trainer does not agree." Walter read it, then read it again. My father finally spoke. "We never intended this level of fallout," Lauren said. "But you did intend the surrender." No one answered. Mediation did not finish that day because Walter asked for time to review the witness statement from Evelyn and the employment contact note from Marcia. We reconvened on September 26th. Same room. slightly stronger air conditioning, different pastries on the sideboard. This time, Walter brought a slimmer folder. He had one new item with him, a note from Hill Country's volunteer coordinator affirming Evelyn's intake memory and attaching the original observation line, handwritten on June 12th before the file was digitized. Male surrendering party called Dog Rusty, corrected by female companion. Claimed family ownership but lacked basic handling familiarity. There is something almost holy about seeing a lie run out of room. Walter put that note down very carefully. My mother reached for it. He placed his hand over the page before she could pick it up. Not yet, he said. That was the first crack in the room. Then Lauren introduced the one person I had not expected to attend in person. Alyssa Becker from the microchip company, there by phone at first, then confirming by signed statement already circulated that the June 9th caller had identified herself as a family member seeking ownership transfer, because the registered owner was medically unable and emotionally unstable. Those were my mother's words. They were in the note. Walter closed his folder. He did not slam it. He did not sigh. He just closed it with both hands neatly, like a man putting away a mistake. My mother's reaction was one sentence. This is absurd. Not loud, not panicked, just smaller than I had ever heard her sound. Lauren said no, it is documented. There was a full 7 seconds where no one spoke. I counted because the vent rattled twice overhead, and I wanted to remember exactly how long it took for her certainty to break. My father looked down at the table and did not raise his eyes again. If you are still listening and you have ever wanted someone else to say the thing you knew was true all along, this is that part. This is the part where the room changes temperature. It is also the part where winning starts to look boring, which is how you know it is real. Boring is where the consequences live. 2 weeks later, on October 10th, the settlement terms were signed. I want to be careful with wording here because real life is less cinematic than people want. There was no judge pounding a gavel. No one got handcuffed in a hallway. What happened was more expensive and more enduring. My parents agreed in writing to pay $68,417, $40,000 within 30 days. The rest over 11 months with interest if they were late. They also had to reimburse my legal fees and sign a statement retracting the aggression claims they had made to the shelter, my housing office, and my employer. Hill Country Animal Services barred both of them from surrendering any animal without additional ownership verification and flagged their names internally for false intake history. My mother was removed from the rescue fundraising committee at her church after Lauren sent the retraction language to the committee treasurer, who apparently did not enjoy learning that a woman soliciting donations had lied to a shelter to get rid of her daughter's dog. My father's volunteer position, transporting dogs for a weekend adoption group, ended the same month for the same reason. Quietly, permanently, specific price matters. Those were theirs. The first payment, $40,000, came by cashier's check dated November 3rd. I remember because I held it in my hand in Lauren's office and stared at my father's name printed on the remitter line. The paper smelled faintly like envelope glue. Lauren said, "You can deposit it." So I did. I used part of it to clear the remaining balance on my student loans. I used part of it to move into a duplex in Leander with a fenced yard where Rufus could run straight from the kitchen door to the back fence in 7 long leaps. I kept every remaining payment confirmation in a green accordion file labeled Porter Matter. I still have it. That is the practical ending. The emotional ending is less neat. Kayla had her baby in October. A girl she texted me from the hospital with one photo and no caption. I visited once, brought soup, held the baby for 14 minutes, and left before my mother arrived. I do not know if that counts as forgiveness. I think it counts as accuracy. My father sent me one email in December. I hope you and Rufus are well. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the soft language of a man still hoping to escape the shape of what he did. I did not answer. My mother sent nothing for 3 months, then mailed a Christmas card with no note inside. Her name was signed in the same careful script she had used when she forged mine, which felt like a joke only I could hear. I threw the card away and kept the envelope. By spring, the church women who used to comment on every one of her fundraiser posts had stopped tagging her. People are never as shocked by cruelty as they are by documentation. Documentation is what makes them move away from you at Fellowship Hall Coffee. Rufus needed time too, after the shelter. He panicked whenever I touched the front door knob with my keys in my hand. He would pace, circle, pant. We worked through it slowly. Same hallway, same commands, tiny increments. He got his confidence back by January. He passed a fresh tracking assessment in February, though the original August placement was gone for good. Travis eventually found another buyer track for him, smaller, later, worth less. That part I accepted, not because it was fair, because it was true. There is a line people love to say after stories like this: at least you got him back. Yes, I did. But the thing they broke was not just custody of a dog, it was the idea that temporary weakness around family is safe. I had surgery. I needed 10 days of help. They used those 10 days to test how completely they could rewrite me on paper: unstable, neglectful, dangerous. Then they carried that version of me to a shelter counter, an apartment office, and my job. I will never not know that about them. Now let me take you forward one last time to a Sunday in March of 2024, early evening. My new kitchen in Leander. The house smelled like roasted carrots and the cedar shavings from the cheap dog bed I had just unboxed. Rufus was asleep on the mat by the back door, twitching in his dream again. My phone lit up with a text from Kayla. Mom says she wants to talk if you're ready. I looked at it for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down and finished my dinner. That is my honest ending, not dramatic, not redemptive, honest. They paid. The records hold. Rufus is here, snoring against the tile while I speak. My mother lost the committee seat she cared about more than she should admit. My father lost access to the rescue network that made him feel like a good man. They sent $68,417 back across 11 months because paper has a way of cornering people who are used to winning in person. I did not get my old family back. I got something better: a fenced yard, a paid-off debt, a file full of proof, a dog who still comes when I call, and a silence I no longer rush to